So here we are with the original seat back. This is the front of it and the back of it. Right, well, we're going to start by digging out this this little bit of trim using a screwdriver. I'm just going to hopefully ease that out. Right, that's the trim removed, and underneath you'll see there's a pale strip of wood, and that's secured in place to the bottom frame channel by 3 pop rivets. So my next task is to drill those out and remove this wooden strip. Cut to a few minutes later, and you can probably see there that the timber infill, which is purely cosmetic, is now removed. Peeled back the stuck edges. This is the stuck edges of the back PVC, and I've disconnected the glued edge of the centre cushion, which just folds back like that. And the centre cushion is held in place by a piece of fabric which is actually stuck down to the back panel of the cushion. So the easiest way to remove that is with the trusty scalpel, just to slice through the fabric, because that will be discarded in the new seat. So that just releases that, and you can see the Pirelli webbing. And that's another thing which I'll replace when I get further on. So I just need to release the side cushions. They're just held in place by I think 3 or 4 hooks, metal hooks, which are fitted into the frame. So those just need to be bent back with a pair of pliers, and then you can release the leather facing covers. I think I've got everything released, so all I'm going to do now is unpeel the cover, and it's really rather like taking a jacket off. You might find there's odd bits stuck which you've got to release with your fingers, but it looks like it's coming away reasonably well. So there we have it. That's the foam and the cardboard back panel. I've turned it around the other way because I'm just working on the centre pad at the moment, and the first thing I've done is to unstick, carefully separate these flaps in the headrest covering from the headrest pillow, and I'll be retaining this for future use. Put that to one side, and the next thing is to get rid of this fabric covering, or to slice through this fabric covering to release the centre backrest cushion. So I just cut through that with a pair of scissors. Ready to come out. You can see in here that the construction of the back is identical to the construction of the seat. Now, if you watch the first part of my video dealing with the seat, you'll have seen that what I did was to dismantle all the leather pieces, splitting all the seams, and transfer the shape and dimensions of each piece of leather onto a piece of thick paper, and then I used that paper as my cutting templates for the new leather. Now, I've already done that for a previous seat for the back, so I'm not going to take the time to dismantle this completely. I think the only thing I need to do on the back is remove this stiffener wire, which you can probably just see me removing from, there's one each side. Take those out because we'll need those again, and basically all I'm going to do with the old cover is very quickly check that all the pieces that I've got templates for are in fact still correct, just to make a sort of sense check. As I say, it's always better to measure twice and cut once, so I'll just double check that my pieces are exactly the right size, compare those with my templates, and then I'll start with cutting out the leather. My next task is to separate the cardboard back from the rest of the seat back. What I've done is I've gone round the edges of the seat and carefully sliced the foam away from the cardboard back. And like everything else on these seats, it's either attached by glue or by pop rivets, so you need to carefully separate the sponge cover, because you're obviously going to keep that for the new seat. And then there are just 2 pop rivets, one on either side in the middle of the side, which you just drill out, and then the cardboard back will come away. So I've gone around it and eased the cardboard off the frame with a screwdriver, and with a bit of luck that will now just separate a little bit more separating required. This headrest foam, which is stuck to the frame, is also stuck to the back, so I'll need to reach in and carefully separate that from the rest of it. And then the cardboard, there's the cardboard, that will come away, and I'm going to use that as the template to make my aluminium back. So here is my aluminium sheet that I'm going to use to make the new aluminium back. This is 1.2mm aluminium, and that's readily available from the usual eBay or Amazon type sources. All I'm going to do now is carefully mark around it, and then cut out the back with my nibbler. You can see where I've marked it out fairly carefully with a felt tip pen. It's important to keep quite tight to the line because you don't want bits of aluminium sticking out beyond the frame. This is the nibbler that I talked about, and the beauty of these rather than a pair of shears is you can go around corners very tightly, and it makes a very clean cut which doesn't distort the metal. The only downside with it is that it's very slow, and you end up, if you don't wear gloves, you'll end up with blisters. So what I'll do now is cut that out and then come back when I've done that. That's the finished cutting out of the new seat back, and the next step is simply to shape that to match the steel tubular frame of the back. Right, you can see here that here's the aluminium sheet that I cut yesterday, and I've just bent it using, as I said, just brute force and ignorance. I just bent it by hand so that it fits the shape of the seat, and I'll just check that by putting it in place, and you can see that it's going to fit quite nicely, and in due course I will pop rivet that into place using the original pop rivet holes plus some additional ones just to make it really structurally sound. So just for the moment I'm going to put that to one side, because the next thing I really need to look at is these straps, which are a bit weak and wobbly, the straps just simply unhook from the frame like so, and then I'm going to make copies of these using some nice new Pirelli rubber which I have here. This is 1.5 inches, exactly the same, and I'm just going to make them about 1 centimetre shorter than the existing ones, just so that there's a little bit of tension in the back so it doesn't feel too sag. So here you have the strap all taken apart. These are the hooks and the staples, the large staples that hold it all together, and I'm simply going to copy that. As I say, I'm going to make it about 1 centimetre shorter than the original. So just mark that. That's the original length, and I'm going to come back about 1 centimetre from that, and then just snip that piece off using a pair of sharp scissors, all very straightforward. And then to replicate the pattern of the ends, I simply lay the old ones over, and I'm going to mark the holes for the staples. So there are 4 staple holes at each end, and there's a larger hole that the hook goes through the middle. Now let me do that on both ends. There's a large hole and 4 staple holes. Okay, which hopefully you can see there. Now then, the next handy gadget is one of these, which actually you can you can find it. Well, I found this in my local supermarket, but these are readily available. It's a hole punch designed for leather work and so on. And using the largest setting, I've cut a generous size hole. It's about 1.5 times the size of the largest one for the hook to go through. Then changing the setting to one of the smaller settings, probably one up from the smallest. I'm going to just punch the holes for the staple to go through. So that's four little holes. There you have the pattern of five holes you end up with, and then just pop the hook back through like so, and the staple goes through from the face side, so it's the opposite of the side that you're actually turning over. Put the bar on the back to stop it pulling through. Just to squeeze that in place. I'll start to turn the legs of the staples over. So there you have it. There's an old one, and that's the new one. So I'll put it right down there so you can see it in sharper focus. And then I just repeat that for each end, and I make 2 more straps. So here are the 3 new straps now in place. Those are the hooks for the side panels of the outer covering when I get those done. And the only next step to do with the back frame is to put the new back cover on. What I'm going to do is just put that in place roughly, which is like that, and then I'm going to clamp it in position. I'm going to use mole grips at the bottom, and then I've got a couple of general purpose clamps that I'm going to use at the top just to squeeze it down so that it's really fitting snugly against the tubes of the frame. And then when I've got it in the position that I think is right, I'm going to carefully mark out the first of the rivet holes and drill that through and get the first rivet in, and then I'll probably do 2 rivets down each side, one somewhere in the top corner here on each side, and a couple of rivets at the back. Right, so I've just pop riveted a couple of rivets in the top just to hold everything in place, and I've got my clamps holding it at the bottom. And this is just for those who haven't used a pop riveter before, let me just quickly demonstrate. Pop riveters, very cheaply available, simple hand tool, and the pop rivet looks like that. It's got a steel shaft and an aluminium rivet. That just pops into the jaws of the machine, pop it in the hole and squeeze the handle. Simple as that. That's the whole of the back panel finished, and we can get on with stitching. Right, so these are all the pieces that I've cut out using the templates I made for the driver's seat, which I've already completed. Now, the 2 seats obviously are absolutely identical, so I've got all the bits of leather I need. And I'm going to start with the centre panel. And like the seat panel, I don't know if you can see here, but this has stitching lines marked on it which correspond to the strips of leather that you see on the original seat. And similarly to the seat panel, I've stuck 6mm scrim to the back so that when I stitch along these lines I'll get a slight quilting effect which replicates the design of the original seats. I'll then attach the head panel and the bottom panel which just closes off the centre pad. Right, I'm going to stitch these lines which I've, and if you can see there, I've marked out in faint yellow pen. Now I'm going to do a couple of back stitches just to lock everything in place, and then we'll stitch forward. I'm just feeding that through evenly at a nice slow pace. Come to the end, and a couple of back stitches just to lock the line, and then I'll just raise the needle, lift the presser foot, and move it out of the way. And there's my new stitched line. So I've finished the straight line quilting on the centre panel, and I'm now going to attach the bottom panel. This is the one that folds underneath to create a sort of an envelope that contains the foam for the back. So again, raise the presser foot, line the stitch line up, and I'm just going to drop the foot into the leather, and using the reverse lever I'm just going to do a couple of back stitches and then forward stitch it all the way through. And then a couple of reverse stitches at the end just to lock the thread in place, and then raise the needle, lift the presser foot, and out it comes. Right, so here we are with the centre back panel almost finished. I've stitched the three main pieces of leather together. Here are the strips, and then I'm just going to stitch in this piece of fabric which creates a pocket which the foam pad will sit in. So it's just two straight runs of stitching, one down each side, and then I'll turn the thing inside out, and then we'll attach it to this seam at the back. So I've just popped it under the presser foot and done a couple of back stitches, and now I'll just do the straight seam all the way down the side. Here we go. Well, here is the back panel, almost ready to put the foam in place. So obviously the front, and this is the back. I've turned the thing inside out since I stitched this bit of fabric in place, and here's the pocket that the foam will pop back into, and the only thing that remains to be done is to stitch the fabric together with this main seam between the headrest and the body part of the panel. So I'll just get that stitched in place. Now the next job is to tackle the covers for the side cushions. This is the right hand one, and the first task is to stitch this seam down here, which will create a long pocket to take the stiffening rod, which is part of the mechanism that holds the pad in place. So it's just a straight stitch near the edge to make sure that there's space for the rod to run behind. Just use my hand stapler to staple the seam in place roughly, just to baste it in place, and now I'll stitch the long seam. So once again, raise the presser foot, slide the workpiece underneath, making sure you've got the threads out of the way, and I'm going to go as close as I think I can to the staples. Just drop the needle, and I'll do a couple of back stitches just to lock it, and away we go. Just keep it pretty close to the staple line. Try not to catch the staple. Next task on these side panels is to stitch this little quadrant in place, and this has got a very tight curve on it, so I'm using lots of staples so the two pieces of leather follow the same curve, and so once again staple in place and then just carefully stitch the two items together. So that's the seam completed, and what I will do on this one is apply some adhesive on the side which is going to be the vertical face, and then stick that seam back on the inside so that it'll make a neat finish. On the original seats that seam is actually top stitch, but I'm not going to do that because, as I've said before, I didn't do that on the first seat and I want the seats to match. So we now have the back cover. This is the centrepiece that covers the centre cushion, and we've got the two side panels here waiting to be stitched in. So it's time to start stitching the whole thing together. The first one to go on to be stitched with the back cover is the centre panel. I've got a centre line here on the back, and I've got a centre line on the back cover, and I'm just going to line those two up as accurately as I possibly can, and once again stitch them in place using my stapling pliers. So that's got that in place, so I'll staple that in place and I'll stitch that first seam. So here's the finished item. That's the complete cover, still inside out of course. I've stitched all the seams. Just a couple of things still to do. When I turn it the right way around, I've got to turn it inside out. I've got to stick in the head pad, and that gets stuck underneath these two flaps, which is the way it was done in the original seat cover. The only other thing I think remaining to do is to trim these seams reasonably close, sort of about 3mm away from the stitch line. So I've turned the cover the right way out. I've stuck the seat pad in here. There's the centre pad, and the next step is to slip the seat frame inside, and you see it fits a bit like a jacket. So here's the seat. Take the sides out of the way. And there'll be a little bit of heaving and shoving and so on to get it in, but basically that's almost it, and you can see extra bit of leather and so on which gets stuck onto the frame at the bottom. Well, I've wrestled the cover into place, and I've slipped these stiffening bars into their little sleeves. So all I've got to do is do a little bit more wrestling just to make sure there's enough tension in the leather, and to avoid as much to make sure I've got as little wrinkling as I can. These little flaps here need to be stuck down over this pad, the sort of rear head pad. Well, I've stretched and wrestled the cover into place, and it's reasonably taut now. It feels nice on these side cushions. And then I've retained that in place. Remember, there's a thick wire stiffener in its sleeve down each side, and that's caught underneath the wire tags that are fixed to the frame. So that's now secured in place, and the next thing is to figure out how to get the back cushion and the headrest to fit snugly inside between these two. Now that's where this piece of fabric, which is stitched to the back, comes into play. It's longer than it needs to be, but that's just handy. Now I'm going to draw that through underneath this spring arrangement, which is a sort of springy plastic covered spring thing, which is tensioned between the two sides. I'm going to draw that through reasonably tight. I'll do it tighter in a moment, and then I'm going to clip that back to the top of the centre panel, just temporarily. Now the headrest is held in place by adhesive applied to the bottom of this piece of fabric, and also to the inside of the aluminium back panel. In the original it's a cardboard back panel, but on mine now aluminium. So I'm going to apply adhesive here and here, just let it go off for a couple of minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, and then I will apply a bit of force to this to hold it down and just press the fabric in place and draw it through across the rest of the seat. So I've stuck that now. There's hardly any tack you can feel on the glue, so it should be ready to stick down. So I'm just going to release the fabric and push it down using as much force as I can muster, and then I'm going to pull it through and stick it in place. And then the remainder of this fabric I'm simply going to feed through underneath these Pirelli straps, and then I'll cut off the excess when it gets through to the bottom. It serves no purpose other than retaining the headrest in place. So that's the headrest tucked down, and I'll snip off that excess in a moment, and then all that remains is to tuck the excess leather into the recess in the frame, making sure that everything is pulled nice and tight. Snip off any excess leather, glue it into that recess, and basically that's the job done. So there we are, that's the centre cushion in place, the headrest in place, side cushions in place. These are just clips holding the edges while they finally stick, and all that remains to be done is to assemble the seat to the back. So here we are, that's the back reassembled onto the seat base. Just 2 bolts hold it on, and you can see the final effect. Thanks for watching, and hope you've enjoyed it.